It is the Fans College Football Podcast. Barrett, Sallee, John Michaels with you. The penultimate rankings came out last night, and we have takes. I'm wearing the Shenanigans hat today. Yes, it is a bar and restaurant in Dahlonega, Georgia. If you're looking for sponsorships opportunities, Dahlonega and Shenanigans, you know where to find us. But a lot of shenanigans in those rankings. Hunter Yurachek tried to explain them, John. He can't explain it. Alabama jumps Notre Dame. Miami still is in purgatory. There's a lot to break down, but Alabama jumping Notre Dame is the one that stood out to everybody. It's almost like they're trying to have some reinforcements in case Georgia dominates Alabama in Atlanta this weekend.
Yeah, what I called it was they gave themselves an out. And full disclosure, I know Bama fans think we hate them. We don't. I thought Alabama always should have been ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I thought it was a farce for a long time that Notre Dame was ranked ahead of Bama. Part of why they did that was to keep Notre Dame and Miami far enough apart where you didn't have those teams having to deal with each other. So that ended up being a big thing in that situation. Well, now you put Alabama back ahead of Notre Dame because you want to give an out in case Alabama loses a close SEC title game where teams don't jump them. The reasoning behind it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, but that's just par for the course when it comes to this committee.
Yeah, they said that Alabama's close, gritty win against Auburn was more impressive than anything they've seen from Alabama this year so far, aside from the Georgia game. They also said the fourth down call was gutsy, which it was. That's accurate. But and they did try to say that Auburn's a tough place to play this year, which is true. But then they said Vanderbilt is an example. Well, I watched that game. I watch every Auburn game. Mm-hmm. It was in Nashville.
Yeah.
Nashville is, 3 hours away from Auburn, depending on how quickly you get to I-65. So these guys don't watch games. They watch box scores. They'll tell you they watch games in that hotel, in that convention center in Grapevine, Texas. They don't. All they do is order takeout and talk to each other about God knows what, and look at 3 computer screens that spit out numbers that are irrelevant, that they don't pay attention to. Alabama deserves to be above Notre Dame. You're right. I agree with you. But to justify it the way they did is absolutely insane. Now, like I said, I think they are giving themselves an out. And I think that out comes if Alabama loses by double digits against Georgia. Let's just say they lose by double digits. It's not really that close of a game. But on paper, you kind of look at it and say, okay, maybe Alabama had a reasonable chance, a Lloyd Christmas. So you're telling me there's a chance in Dumb and Dumber type opportunity in the fourth quarter. It does give them a chance to say, hey, look, Alabama got to play Georgia close. We're going to put them in, even though it was another loss. But in reality, to me, John, you should not be able to play yourself out of the college football playoff if you've played yourself in to an extra game. It's the same justification they used for SMU last year. Mm-hmm. Now, last year, this year, all the rules change. They say they don't, but they most certainly do, because the landscape of college football changes year to year and week to week. So they do have to go with the flow. With that said, there's no chance Alabama should be left out. Zero. But the justification for jumping them over Notre Dame was one of the dumbest things we've heard, not only this year, but throughout this whole process of the expanded playoff. And that's saying a lot, because there's been some really dumb things that this committee has said.
Yeah, I'll disagree a little bit when it comes to should you be left out of the postseason or not when it comes to Alabama. Should they be a team that maybe gets knocked out if they lose an SEC title game? That would then give them a third loss. They would also have the worst loss of anybody that's inside the top 25 outside of Texas. They would have a loss to 7-loss Florida State. So I could see a scenario where if Alabama lost this game, they could fall out, because all of these teams, to Hunter Yurachek's word, were very, very close, and even something like this could be different. Now, where they changed from last year, they, on the Tuesday when they made the announcement a year ago, point blank said nobody outside of the top 12, outside of Clemson, who could play their way in, would be able to move into the college football playoffs. Last night, though, they said they're going to re-rank everything on Sunday morning, and there are teams that are idle that could potentially move up or move down. So who does that affect? That affects Miami. That affects potentially Texas or Vanderbilt. I don't think Texas or Vanderbilt would jump up multiple spots, but just say Alabama loses by a lot. BYU, who I think is getting completely screwed in this whole thing, doesn't win their way in. Could a Miami and Notre Dame then come head-to-head and you finally actually use the head-to-head, which you use for Georgia over Ole Miss, you use for Oklahoma over Alabama, you even use for 3-loss Texas over 2-loss Vanderbilt? Could they finally put that metric in place, and could Notre Dame sitting at home maybe lose? This is what they left open for interpretation last night, which is an utter hunk of garbage, because they could have made it simple and plain. They don't want to. You know why? Because they want dummies like me to be tuned in at 12:05 on Sunday, hoping and praying things go my way.
Oh, and you know they're going to drag that thing out, too. It's all about ratings. It's a TV show, so they're going to drag that thing out like they do every single year. Now, you're a Miami guy. Miami's not playing this weekend. Virginia and Duke are in the ACC championship game. To me, this is an interesting scenario for Miami, because I think for Miami, you just mentioned it. If the committee gets handed on a silver platter a discussion solely between Notre Dame and Miami, that is massive. That's massive, because they just at that point can't go in to name brand value. And Notre Dame does have a much more significant brand over Miami. I know you hate to hear that, but there's a reason that every TV network picks Notre Dame over every other team when they get a chance, ESPN and ABC included. So if there's a way for Miami and Notre Dame to be the only two teams in a discussion, and they say they do it by 3-team pods, 14 pods, and all this other nonsense, but for Miami, that's how it needs to be done. If that happens, it's going to have a lot to do with what happens in the ACC championship game.
Yeah, and I think, and you go to the ACC championship game, shout out to Jim Phillips for such a bang-up tiebreaker scenario where you let a 5-loss team who was 0-2 against all the other teams they were tied with somehow make your conference championship game, because you didn't use common sense during the offseason and say, hey, let's get to a certain tiebreaker and then we just go to the college football playoff rankings. That way you would have had 2 10-2 teams here in Miami and Virginia with a chance to go in, but neither here nor there. Here's this doomsday scenario for the ACC. Duke wins this game. They're currently unranked. They're ranked behind multiple group of 5 teams who, if they win, are going to stay ranked ahead of the Blue Devils. Why is this important? For people that don't understand, it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions, not the 5 highest ranked group of 4 teams plus 1 group of 5. That means it could potentially be Tulane or North Texas and James Madison getting bids, automatic bids to the playoffs if Duke wins this game. How does that become important to Miami? I think the committee then would look and go, wait a second, I don't know that we want to leave the ACC out all the way, and maybe that could help elevate Miami, a team that's sitting at home doing nothing, into a college football playoff. So if you're a Canes fan, it's probably pretty simple. You want Duke to win to make it chaos. You definitely need BYU to win. Notre Dame also needs BYU, you need Texas Tech to win over BYU. Notre Dame also needs Texas Tech to beat BYU. And you probably want Alabama to win against Georgia. That would put it down to a 2-team conversation with Miami and Notre Dame. And then if they have any balls, they use the head-to-head comparison, which should have been used all along, and then Miami ends up getting in. If not, I think if Alabama loses close, Barrett, Notre Dame will jump them to 9. They drop Alabama to 10, and that's the end of your playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, for Notre Dame, they have that international draw going for them. And that's the biggest problem. They'll never admit it, but that is accurate. That's how they operate. Now, a big question going into last night's ratings was what they do with Ole Miss after all the Lane Kiffin drama. It was so nice of Lane Kiffin to allow Charlie Weis Jr. to coach with Ole Miss like he's a giant toddler. But good for Ole Miss, because Charlie Weis Jr. is a very good offensive coordinator. So Ole Miss, to me, didn't really get punished by that. It was mentioned in the discussion with Hunter Yurchek, both on the TV show, but also in the teleconference that they have after the rankings are complete. But to me, I think Ole Miss, I still believe in Ole Miss. I do think that they have what it takes with that running game with Lacey and also Trinidad Chambliss to to have a national championship caliber run, the matchups have to dictate it, though. And to me, I think that's the biggest thing. Penn State was not a top 4 team last year, but they were within a kick of making the national championship game. It's all about your path. And I think for Ole Miss, the way things might shape up, getting a home game in the first round of the playoff, that could go a long way, just like it did for Penn State last year, toward really affecting the path and how to get to a national championship game. I can't wait to see what Ole Miss is. And look, I think unless you're, I don't know, LSU, or you're a Georgia fan, or you're an Ohio State or an Indiana fan where you actually have a dog in the fight, the Ole Miss is America's team. Ole Miss is 100% America's team. If you don't have a dog in the fight, or if you're just a casual, if you don't pay attention to college football all that much, I think everybody on the planet's rooting for Ole Miss. And getting Charlie Weiss Jr. back, at least for this run, and Lane Kiffin allowing him to do it, that's a pretty big get for the Rebels.
And I think that's why they elevated Pete Golding to be the head coach. They wanted to keep as much continuity as they potentially could. If all of a sudden you tell Pete Golding, go to LSU or go do whatever, you're going to have a team in complete disarray. One, I will say I'm happy the committee actually did the right thing. We brought this up on Monday on our show here in Atlanta on 680 The Fan, and Ole Miss fans didn't listen to the clip. I brought it up and said, hey, there was precedent set a couple of years ago with Florida State. I thought it was absolute BS then. Florida State should have been in the 4-team playoff as a 13-0 conference champ. They came up with whatever rule 6.9.3 that they wanted to use to keep them out. Then the conversation started over the weekend. If Lane Kiffin leaves, does Ole Miss get left out? Look, you cannot leave out an 11-1 SEC team. I don't care if Bobo the Clown was out there coaching them during the postseason. Those kids earned it. And Barrett, you're right. I think if you're a casual non-SEC fan, you got to cheer for Ole Miss, because I want to see Trinidad Chambliss, who was already a great story, play well. I'd like to see those kids win and kind of stick it to Lane Kiffin, who basically said, this was all about me. I could play that I wanted to do everything right by the kids. It was all about what you were going to make at LSU and going to have a better opportunity. So good for the committee for getting it right. And I will tell you, the Grove, if they end up hosting a first-round game, is going to be must-see TV.
Oh, my God, that place. If you've never been to the Grove, it gets messy. And a cold winter day, potentially maybe if there's sleet, oh, my God, be an absolute mosh pit. I would love to be in that city, in that tailgating situation if that does happen. All right, let's get to some games real quick this weekend. Ohio State, Indiana. Ohio State's favored. I honestly don't even really care about this game, to be honest with you. I didn't know that's not really the way you should go about this if you're, one of us in radio, doing podcasts, in TV, whatever. I don't really care about this game. I think Indiana has a much better chance because an angry Curt Cignetti is a very dangerous Curt Cignetti, and he is angry that he's getting overlooked this week, this year. So I think Ohio State wins. I do think it'll be close because Julian's saying this defense against Indiana, going to be a little tough, but it's going to be a low-scoring affair. I'll take Ohio State. I'll take them to cover in a very ugly, very boring, very nondescript game. Yeah,
what's interesting, we have the least interesting 1 versus 2 matchup in the history of college football. Like anytime you have number 1 versus number 2, it's supposed to be a special occasion. But because it's a Big Ten championship game that doesn't really matter, both teams are in. I think both teams are locks to have buys. I don't think whoever loses this game, unless they lost like 63-3, would fall out of one of the top 4 seeds. Maybe the biggest piece of intrigue is who's the Heisman Trophy winner. Is it Diego Pavia, who doesn't have a game, or could it be the winner of this game? If Julian Sayin or Fernando Mendoza play really well, maybe they end up winning the Heisman. But you're right, Barrett. It's very little intrigue for a game that should be uber important, and that'll tell you why I think conference championship games within the next 5 years disappear. I'm taking Indiana in the upset. I don't think Ohio State's been challenged at all since week 1, and some would argue in that week 1 they weren't challenged at all. I think Indiana is more motivated than Ohio State to win this game, who finally got the Michigan monkey off their back last week. Give me Indiana in a close upset over the Buckeyes.
Our Heisman Trophy ballots are due, I think, Monday morning or Monday midday. I can't tell you who I would vote for because they'll break my door down and take me into Heisman Trophy jail. But unless something happens, my Heisman Trophy winner and my number one vote is not playing this weekend.
Okay.
You can read between the lines.
So you're voting for Malachi Toney. Good for you. He's the best player in the country.
I'm voting for Jackson Arnold just because I want to be a homer for Auburn. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, it's nondescript. It's almost like the regular season doesn't matter anymore. I'm just saying that was my argument all along, but 1 and 2 playing each other really does not have any juice at all this week. Duke and Virginia really don't either. I honestly don't even really care who wins this game. I like Morris. I think Virginia's going to get the job done. I love Tony Elliott. So give me the Cavaliers. I don't even really care, honestly. I know you need Duke, and I'm sorry, but give me the Cavaliers in a game that very, very few people, if any, are actually going to watch.
I would say, Barrett, here's the dilemma. I have a love-hate, mostly hate relationship with Manny Diaz, and he has weaseled his way into an ACC championship game. I hope, personally, I probably need Duke to win. I don't know that that's going to matter at all. I hope Virginia boat races them. They beat them a couple of weeks ago, 34-17. The game wasn't particularly close. I think they get it done again. Virginia and our buddy Matt Schaub are going to have a chance to be in the college football playoff.
All right, we've seen it again. We've seen it once. We'll see it again. Texas Tech and BYU. Texas Tech's defense has been lights out. If you haven't watched it, and big news this week, Baron Morton is actually practicing. The boot is off, so you will see a little bit of a different-looking Texas Tech offense, assuming he does play, and certainly all signs are pointing to that. I think this is going to be ugly. I think it's going to be ugly again. I don't think you're going to see much offense because Texas Tech is not going to try to do anything. It's going to rely on its defense. McGuire, that's typically how he operates when things are a little sketchy. He does kind of tone it down. And so give me Texas Tech. I think they win. I think they win ugly. BYU gets knocked out. And I really hope this doesn't change the country's opinion of Texas Tech just because they win ugly against the BYU team that maybe some people around the country think is a little bit overrated. That doesn't change the fact that this team deserves a first-round bye. They are not only a legit contender. I think if they win the national championship, they've earned it. But this one will be ugly. It's going to be a slop fest. You're not going to see much offense, but you're going to see that Texas Tech defense do what they've done all year. Yeah,
Texas Tech won by 3 scores the last time they play. I expect kind of more of the same. This will tell you what kind of sick college football guy I am. As I'm watching on this final Saturday that just passed, somehow I have to flip over to UCF and BYU because UCF had jumped up 14-0. And as somebody that needed some upsets, I'm like, oh, let me watch this. And when I watch BYU, I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. Bear Bachmeier is a nice story as a freshman quarterback. I like their running back, LJ Martin. They're slow. They don't feel like they're super athletic. Maybe that's just me watching them against UCF. They did eventually grind down the Knights, who are a terrible football team. But I think Texas Tech runs them out of town, and BYU ends up in, I don't know, the Holiday Bowl or the Pop-Tarts Bowl or something along those lines.
All right, last one here in Atlanta, the big one, the one that I think everybody's excited about, the rematch, Georgia and Alabama. Of course, Alabama has had the Bulldogs number seemingly forever at this point, other than the national championship game up in Indianapolis. Look, it's interesting. I think you look at the line, it's very small. I think the ESPN machine or whatever it is in Bristol has Alabama as like a 51% chance of winning, which to me is a little bit crazy because I do think Georgia's a better football team. Maybe there's a little bit to that track record. But again, history is history. A lot of these players for Georgia and for Alabama really don't care, weren't around for a lot of those Alabama wins. I think the biggest difference now between what we saw earlier this season is that Georgia doesn't have that slow start mindset. They are getting out to better starts. They are a more complete football team. They have found that running game again with Nate Frazier. The offensive line issues with Bobo are certainly out there, but I think from what we saw with Alabama, it's been a season-long thing. They've got some injuries as well, but they can't run the football. And what we saw against Auburn is DJ Durkin absolutely let it rip in that second half. Just let it rip, blitz after blitz after blitz. And when Ty Simpson was pressured up the middle, it was a deer in headlights. I mean, he was just throwing up YOLO balls left and right, and that was a big reason why Auburn got back in the game, ultimately tied it. So to me, I think that's going to be the difference. I don't think Alabama really has much of a chance in terms of a shootout. So if that's what Georgia can make it, then it's going to get sideways. But I do think Georgia's going to keep things close to the vest. They're not going to be threatened by Alabama. They're going to dominate this game on the field, but when you look at it on paper, maybe when you look at it at the start of the fourth quarter, you're going to see, oh, maybe it's a 10-point game. Maybe Alabama has a chance in the fourth quarter. But in reality, you're going to see a game that Georgia dominates. Give me the Dogs to go in to the college football playoff, get that first round bye. But again, like I said before, Alabama still deserves to be in. I don't care what happens, especially if it's a relatively close game on paper, because that's really all the committee watches anyway. Alabama should still be in.
I was going to say, the committee doesn't have much else to do this week. There's only like 5 or 6 games.
There's
so
a
how
lot
about
of good takeout
actually sit down and make them watch all of them and take notes and everything else. Look, the first game was really funky. Alabama goes 13-19 on third down conversions. Georgia outrushes them like 220 to 105. Georgia has the drop down the middle of the field that would have put them up late in the fourth quarter. Cass Jones gets tripped up on 4th and 1. I think it's still going to be close. Until Georgia shows me they can beat Alabama, which they've only done once in the past 11 games, I think Alabama's going to be right there in the fourth quarter. So for Notre Dame and Miami fans, things are going to be tightening up, if you know what I'm saying, in the fourth quarter, is you're probably going to want Alabama either to win or get blown out. And the last scenario you want is it to be a really close game. I think it's a really close game. I do think the Dogs get revenge. I'm going to take them 28-24 over the Crimson Tide.
All right, there you have it. Championship week coming up this weekend. We'll know about the 12-team playoff and where everybody's going Sunday afternoon, probably after a very long and a very drawn-out television show, because that's generally how these things operate. He's John Michaels. I'm Barrett Sallee. Subscribe to the Fans College Football Podcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back next week to break down the matchups in the college football playoff.